Good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We're broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. And the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 has passed. We are going to talk about that. Yes, the Senate approved it last night, late last night. Everything seems when there's something of great importance, it's always so late at night. Washington doesn't seem to plan their time very well, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Later on the program, we're going to talk to Shantella Elbers. She is the star of a new film from Lionsgate. It's a Western. It's called Two Sinners and a Mule, which is a clever name, I think, or a catchy name, may be the right term. So we're going to talk to her for just a little bit and find out about the movie itself and her career. So that's about 10, 15 minutes. So let's dive right into it. We have too much to discuss this morning and we can't mess around. So the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 was voted on last night by the Senate, passed 63 to 36. This was late last night. I guess I was surprised when I heard that it went through quite that quickly, but they did vote on, 11 amendments failed. See, that was one of the big catches. If an amendment changed things, it'd have to go back to the House, and then obviously would have missed that June 5th deadline. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, our senator, said, "We may be a little tired, but we did it." I guess we're supposed to feel sorry for him. I don't know. Again, time management. I always thought it was very funny where, I don't know if it was the omnibus or whatever, whenever there's a major piece of legislation, it's always, we've got to do it. This is going to be the end of the world if we don't do it. So let's meet in about a week and a half and discuss it. Or we'll talk about it on Tuesday and it's Friday kind of thing. It never really made sense to me, but again, maybe there's reasonings behind the scene that I just don't realize. But he said, we may be a little tired, but we did it. This is Chuck Schumer. So we're very, very happy. Default was a giant sword hanging over America's head. But because of the good work of President Biden, as well as Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate, we are not defaulting. No Republican credit. McCarthy had nothing to do with this. The way that McCarthy rallied the troops on this is very impressive. There were some thoughts early on, before he became Speaker, in the early days of Speaker, of whether or not he would be an effective leader. That was coming from, various sides of the political spectrum, but even on the Republican side, saying, well, he's a nice guy. We like him. We talked about it yesterday with former Congressman Joe Semplinsky. People like him. He has good relationships, but will he be the leader that we need? And he's done a great job. Whether or not you supported this, it's still impressive that he was able to get the votes needed and come up with a negotiation and to come up with this quote-unquote bargain. The measure passed in the House, by a wide range, 314 to 317. But in the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell issued a statement on the passage of the debt ceiling, saying that an important step toward fiscal sanity will finally become law. So we're going to see what some of the people that had, comments on this. We're going to talk a little bit about that, because there's those in the far left that aren't happy. There's some, I wouldn't even say on the far right, though there are obviously some of those, but in even the more moderate factions of the Republican Party that weren't happy with it for various reasons. So we're going to talk about that. And then we're not going to spend the whole morning on it. I just think because it's breaking news that it's worth talking about, and considering we spent a considerable amount of time here on Frankly Speaking discussing this exact bill. So we'll talk about it when we come back. I realize I'm running late already, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio on beautiful Market Street in Corning. I am your host, Frank Acom. You can always contact me if you'd like to weigh in on the Senate passing the debt ceiling bill last night. Again, I left my paperwork over here. Called, I keep forgetting the name of it, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023, passing last night, 63 to 36. And the reason I say you can weigh in, sometimes I read your comments, sometimes I'm able to post them, sometimes I check them after. And we received, I think, a very good point from a viewer. It is typical late night, after dark, while everyone is asleep, bill passed. Very typical, isn't it? And again, it is fascinating to me, the time frames on anything like this, only because it was so hyped up that this was going to be the end of the world if we don't make June 1st. Oh, wait, I guess June 5th. Yeah, I sometimes wonder if it didn't get passed, if they would have sent it back to the House with some amendments or whatever, if it would have been, okay, we said June 5th, but it's actually going to be June 15th. I'm always a little fascinated about what's going on behind the scenes. Now, Elizabeth Warren, former presidential candidate, and Bernie Sanders, not happy with the deal. A lot of these comments coming from before the vote or right around the vote. But Senator Elizabeth Warren said we should never have been put in this position to begin with. This is about paying the ransom to a bunch of hostage takers. And that is not how we should run this government. It's not good for the people of this country, and it's not good for the position of the United States all around the world. They said, well, what's your major concerns with it? She said, it's every part of it. That's every major concern, is every part of it. She said, it makes sure that billionaire, I love rhetoric, and makes sure that billionaire tax cheats will be able to keep cheating and have less opportunities to get caught. Excuse me. Is that in there? Is that the kind of language that's in there? Billionaire tax cheats? Keep cheating? I didn't see that part of the bill. Bernie Sanders, and again, I'm showing you some of the far left's comments on this, but I'm going to give you a couple of Republican comments on it as well. So Sanders said, Bernie Sanders, also former presidential candidate, all I can tell you is that we live in a society where working people are falling further behind, and the wealthiest people are doing phenomenally well. So tonight, corporate America is pretty happy. Richest people are feeling pretty good. But if you are a working class person, elderly person, low income person, then maybe not so good. Maybe you're going to lose a little of your benefits. Not a good deal. Yeah, again, typical political rhetoric. I mean, nothing new there, and nothing new from Bernie. I mean, I would expect a statement like that being made from Senator Sanders. But Lindsey Graham was fired up. Lindsey Graham was not happy over the level of defense spending. He said, I think this is one of the most ill-conceived ideas for the national defense I've ever seen since the 2011 sequestration. That was the same 2011 type deal where it was down to the wire. I know in divided government it's tough. Again, this is Senator Graham. But don't tell me that this is the best we could do. The party of Ronald Reagan is in jeopardy. This is really dumb. A lot of interesting wording there from Senator Graham. Senator John Cornyn, a member of the Senate Republican leadership, said, I think we're being jammed by Joe Biden. We're backed up here against the X date, and this could have happened months ago, meaning the vote. And he's right. The media has not mentioned this in a very long time, and it's the only people that are mentioning it are Republicans. Democrats, obviously not in their talking points, but Joe Biden dragged his feet so long on this. These negotiations should have started months before they actually did. We all knew that this date was coming up somewhere. But yeah, so this could have happened months ago. So I'm not happy with it, or happy with him. I'm not happy with the process. That's, again, Senator John Cornyn. Yeah, a lot of people get very upset when you have these late night votes and this up to the wire votes, because it does, change the process. If Joe Biden hadn't waited so long, President Biden, would Senate Democrats had more of an opportunity to make amendments on the deal coming from the House? They would have. So I could understand why they would be mad in their own party. I think, again, very impressed with McCarthy and the negotiations he made. Whether or not you like everything that's in this Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 or not, what he was able to accomplish in the House was impressive, and then to be rushed through the Senate in this matter, all a fascinating process. And that's why we were glad former Congressman Joe Sempolinski could be on the program yesterday to kind of explain more of the wonky behind-the-scenes aspects to these kind of votes. So that's enough on that. But if you'd like to weigh in, again, before we go to break, I'm going to put my contact information up. If you would like to weigh in on this topic or any of the topics that we mentioned, or just in general, maybe you have something you want to say, contact me there, and I'll try to, if I have an opportunity, I'll try to read it on the program. But we are going to go to some New York issues. We also have a few presidential things. Of course, you saw that unfortunate incident yesterday where President Biden fell. We're going to talk about that, what the former President Trump had to say about it, what some others had to say about it. That's coming up in a little bit. But don't forget, Chantal Albers, the star of the new Lionsgate film, which is on demand now, by the way, if you are interested. If you're a Western fan, I have not seen it yet, full disclosure, so I look forward to it at some point. But it's called Two Sinners and a Mule, so she'll tell us about that in just a little bit. But let me take that short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back here with Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox, broadcasting from the Hesselson studio on this beautiful day on Market Street. I have a scam announcement to make for you, just so that you are aware, from our friend Sheriff Jim Allard. But before that, the Fiscal Responsibility Act did pass last night, 63-36 in the House. I just received this from a viewer. Ignoring how much we are forced to pay to the Federal Reserve and wondering how long till they dangle your government privileges over your head again. So keep weighing in. What did you think? I guess I was a little surprised with the time frame and how quickly this went through in the Senate, but I think there was a kind of a rally around the fact that the June 5th was a hard deadline, and that's why the amendment votes failed yesterday, because then it would have had to go back to the House. But okay, and again, we could talk more about this if you want to weigh in. The scam alert coming from Sheriff Jim Allard, that the Sheriff's Office received a report from 2 residents that a new scam was being conducted. The report was that persons received a phone call from a person identifying themselves as, remember this name, Sergeant Matt Sorge of the Sheriff's Office, and that they missed a court appearance. So this person, this fake, phony person, is calling you and saying, hey, you missed a court appearance, and if you don't want to be apprehended, you need to send gift cards to a specific address. And he's going to mention it here, but anytime there's something that you're in some kind of trouble, or when they start talking gift cards, just think to yourself, feel it in your gut, and that's the number one thing with a lot of these scams. Does it seem like the Sheriff's Office would say, hey, we're going to throw you in jail unless you send us Amazon gift cards or some type of gift cards? It just doesn't add up, right? It's also reported that, this is the scary part, that the caller ID on the person call displayed Steuben Sheriff. So it actually came up. So you can't trust the caller IDs because they now have ways that they can doctor that up, for a non-technical term, where they can change what it actually says. Again, this is the important part, and then we're going to move on. At no time will any member of the Sheriff's Office request a wire transfer, okay? They will not ask for gift cards or any other direct payment from a person in lieu of apprehension. Anytime electronic money transfers or gift cards are requested in lieu of apprehension, it is surely a scam. And I would say in most instances, in general, not just from the Sheriff's Office, in general, it's a scam. Please do not fall prey to this. And if you have received this call, or unfortunately maybe fallen for it, please do not hesitate. Call the Steuben County Sheriff's Office immediately. Okay, that's a scam update. Wanted to keep you safe. That's what we try to do here on Frankly Speaking. So we got 1 week to go in. How am I doing on time? Good. I just don't want to be late for Chantella Albers, the star of the new movie Two Sinners and a Mule, on direct right now. You can find it now through the various outlets that you use. Okay. 1 week to go. New York lawmakers seek their final deals. I don't think we had an opportunity to talk about this yesterday on the program, but the clean slate bill looks like that is going to go through. And what that does is it erases your past criminal record, so that when you go to find a job, your potential employer will not see your criminal record. Now, there are things cut out of there. Certain things, of course, sexual assaults and things like that, I believe, are not a part of this bill. But the argument's been, well, this will help the workforce. For all these jobs where people need someone to hire, that won't be a hindrance for ex-cons to maybe find employment. But I saw someone, I wish I could quote them because I thought it was such a good point on this argument. They said, that makes no sense, because if you are desperate to hire someone and you don't mind that they may have a criminal record, hire them. No one's saying you can't hire a former criminal, for lack of a better term. So all the government's saying is, well, let's maybe dupe people into hiring somebody that they may have concerns over. And again, there are a lot of caveats in this, but the reason I mention it is just painting a larger picture, right? About public safety, about coddling criminals. Now, I know there's a lot of people that have made right in prison when they got out and they paid their dues, and I'm not suggesting this is a one-size-fits-all, but it's just a part of that larger picture. And when they were talking about the 1 week left to go in the session, it was, I think it was Will Barclay. Yeah, Assembly Minority Leader Will Barclay. No, it wasn't. I apologize. It was Senator George Borrello. He said, people of New York State want to be safer, and they want New York to be more affordable. Ultimately, people feel this is not a safe state and it is not an affordable state. And he's exactly right. That's what the direction we seem to go now, whether it was the budget and that minuscule change that Governor Hochul made to bail reform. This Clean Slate Act, people do not feel safe. Now, if you hear one side of the aisle, they'll say, well, never mind what you're seeing, never mind what you're feeling, never mind what you're experiencing. Trust these poll numbers, which we've talked about polls enough in the past and how not only unreliable they are, but how easily they're manipulated. So they'll say, never mind that your family, some loved one, some friend, some neighbor has been affected by this increase in crime. Never mind that. Trust us in what we're saying. But yes, there's obviously a real concern about safety, and like Senator Borrello said, being an affordable state, which we are not. So those are what should be focused on. It does not look like that will be the focus of the final deals being made this week in the session. The good news, and this is the quote I wanted to give you from Minority Leader Will Barclay, saying the good news is I think we're passing a lot of local bills and more run-of-the-mill type stuff. I'm optimistic that we can end sometime next week. But yeah, it does go back to public safety, and Governor Hochul knows that. We talked about it yesterday with Joe Semplinsky, that politically speaking, it was a smart move, even if it's not going to really do anything with her bail reform change, because now she can go around and say, look, I'm doing something about it. And because the poll numbers show, and again, I don't trust polls, but the poll numbers show, and I would say the verification of that is how good that Lee Zeldin did, running on the issue of public safety, that she realizes that people are getting fed up and that this could hurt her, because this is what it all boils down to, hurt her for re-election, because she never expected Lee Zeldin to do this well. So she has to make moves in a political direction and make it look like she's doing something. So again, and that's politics 101, right? You got to look like you're doing something. It doesn't matter if it works. Sometimes it could be actually detrimental. But as long as you can go out there and send the press release and give the speeches and say, look, I care about your public safety, and to prove it, look what we got passed through in the budget. A little bit more on New York State when we come back, but actually immediately when we come back from this break, we're going to talk with Shantella Albers. It's a very nice name. I just keep forgetting how to say it. Shantella Albers. She is the star of Two Sinners and a Mule, out now. You can find it wherever you stream. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. This is the M.A. Neal Financial Services section of our program, and our guest this morning is the star of Two Sinners and a Mule. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
This is exciting because I'm a big fan of Westerns, and I also love the name of this movie. Could you tell us a little bit about the movie?
Yeah, well, the name is a little bit self-explanatory. It's Two Sinners and a Mule, so it starts off with two sinners. I'm one of the sinners actually. We get kicked out of town by the Women's Decency League.
Okay.
Um, and so we start on this adventure of starting a new life, and we come upon this bounty hunter who's left for dead. But we kind of make a deal with him. We're like, you know what? We'll nurse you back to health if you can give us half your bounty. And
Oh, wow.
so it's kind of a deal that he's not really able to refuse. And so we go on an adventure of like gunfights and
Oh.
heartache and all kinds of stuff. So the ending is much different from the beginning.
So basically, the perfect Western movie.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot that happens like in between and
Yeah.
stuff. So the ending is quite shocking from where the characters started.
What was it that drew you to the film?
You know, what I kind of liked about the film is the character of Alice.
Okay.
And I really liked how she has this transformation. You know, she starts off as a sinner, but then once she's kicked out of town, and I kind of think as the character, I think she kind of started this with her transformation before the film even began. Because once she gets kicked out of town, I think she kind of sees it as a blessing in disguise a little bit.
Okay.
Because she was wanting to start a new life and everything. So I kind of like the growth of where she starts from and then where she ends, because she's completely made anew by the end of the film, and she even mentions God and forgiveness, and so there's a little bit of that element into it that I liked that they added into the script. So
And it's a pretty amazing cast.
yeah, we've got a lot of great people attached to it. So
So I did a little research, of course, and with your childhood, it seems like it's only natural that you'd be in a Western someday, right?
yeah, I spent so many years on the farm growing up. I've helped my dad actually tag calves in the pasture and everything, and that's always a really fun experience to do in the summer with my dad and everything. The cows and the mamas, they're so cute together. So this didn't really, this wasn't really ranching, but the Western lifestyle definitely is very similar to a farm lifestyle or a
course.
ranch lifestyle. So
Well, I'm a big fan of Westerns, so how did you prepare for the role? You already knew how to ride a horse, but there's got to be a lot more to it than that.
yeah. Well, how I always like to approach every role is to read the script multiple times,
Sure.
because I think that's how you get to know the character and get to know the relationships between your character and the other characters in the film.
Right.
So I feel like you can just develop like a deep bond and make your character decisions based on what's in the script. Like, for instance, there is a scene in the film where Alice is sitting with Eldon, the bounty hunter, and they're on a log, and she's talking about how she was supposed to be married, but her husband died. And so I don't know, just me as the actor, I kind of read into what was in the script, and it was sort of like she's telling this story, and she says how she was a mail order bride. Her husband was very wealthy. He owned lots of cattle. His kin didn't really like the two of them getting married. They were supposed to get married, and all of a sudden he, falls off his horse
Yeah.
and hits his head on a rock and dies. And I'm like, that's very convenient.
Yeah.
So you just as, that wasn't in the script, but just as the character, that's kind of the choice that I made. And
Yeah.
I just kind of got that from reading the script over again. So.
In preparation, did you watch a lot of old Westerns, or because this is so different, was that not necessary? Excuse me.
I did like to watch a lot of Gunsmoke and Bonanza.
of course.
And I feel like this movie has some of the same humor that's in those old Westerns from that time. There's a lot of dialogue in there
Yeah.
that's kind of catchy, kind of hokey, and just, it's a little bit, it kind of does remind me of Bonanza a little bit.
That's
So-
wonderful. One of the greatest shows of all time.
Oh, I know. Both my grandpas loved that show.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I saw some of the reviews. Screen Rant calls it a Western thriller with a strong female twist, which is interesting because I was trying to think of old Westerns that I've watched, and that's not a typical Western movie.
Yeah, it's really not. With this one, it is funny because you've got the two sinners, which is like
Right.
the two leads of the film, but it also kind of turns into a trio. So
Yeah.
I think having a male in there kind of balances out the energy a little bit. I think, but yeah, it ends with a strong female lead. Also with the female heroine is what I meant by that. So. Yeah, you don't see that too much in Westerns. You normally see that maybe in thrillers or horror films, but so.
For those of us that will never know what it's like, what is it like on the set of a Western?
Oh, well, every set is different, of course.
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
think that one thing that I really had to get used to, we filmed in New Mexico, and the elevation was really affecting me a lot because, in LA, we're at sea level, and
Sure.
then going up into the mountains, it really affected me a lot. So, like, the wind and the heat and the elevation is kind of what I think added to the elements of the film, though, you
Yeah.
know, it kind of makes it a little bit easier to act in your character a little
Sure.
bit when you've got all those natural things coming at you that
Well, it's
they
got to
had
be
in the.
beautiful being there too to see all of that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the scenery, New Mexico, I think is so beautiful. The sky, there's something different about the sky
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
It's just a beautiful place.
So in the past, you received a lot of awards for producing and starring in the film The Sixth Friend, and that was a horror movie. How is it different doing a horror movie as compared to a Western?
You know, there are similarities to it because there's so much humor
Yeah.
that is in horror also, and there's a lot of humor in this particular show also.
Yeah.
But I guess the main difference is, you know, you want to build that suspense,
Mhm.
I guess, in horror, and it's more of like a jumping suspense, whereas in a Western and when it's more of a thriller drama like this, the suspense is maybe laid out a little bit. It's
Yeah.
kind of like what's going to happen, you know, at the end of this film, whereas in a horror film, it's kind of like,
Yeah,
"Ugh,"
right
you know,
there.
it's just a little
Yeah.
bit more of a jumpy energy, I think.
Yeah,
So,
and that's a good point about the comedy because in westerns and horrors, there's always that like that tongue-in-cheek humor where
yeah.
everybody's kind of in on it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So you've worked in comedy, horror, drama, now westerns. Do you have a favorite genre, or do you like to expand and do all?
Oh, I want to expand and do
Yeah.
all, but I do love doing comedy.
Oh, yeah,
It always has been one of my favorites.
Yeah, yeah.
And people love to laugh too,
Right.
you know.
You
so-
can't go wrong when you hear everybody laughing, right? You sometimes you see a
Right.
movie and they're crying, you feel bad. I'm guessing. I've never been in a movie, but
Yeah.
at least there it's always nice to have that distraction. But when did you know you
Yeah.
wanted to become an actress?
Gosh, I've always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
As a kid, I remember going through the newspaper and being like, "Oh, there's this local audition for some theater troupe that I want to audition for, Mom and Dad." So
Yeah.
I would do that as a kid. I did have a head injury when I was 4,
Oh wow.
and I remember being in the hospital and waking up from that and just thinking, "Gosh, I really want to act." And like watching, I think it was like a McDonald's commercial or something like
Yeah.
that, and thinking, "Man, that looks like fun. I really want to do that." And then a few years later, I was just, you know,
Hooked.
convincing my parents to take me to these random auditions, and so
Did they encourage you?
at first they were kind of like, this is going to be a commitment going to these
Right.
rehearsals all the time, but then eventually they
Yeah.
saw that, yeah, it is something that I really want to do, and so they support me 100% then. So
And did you study that in college?
I did, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I went to school for theater.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, we're so glad that you're doing so well because it's getting great reviews. Two Sinners and a Mule. Where's the best place that people can watch it?
You can watch it on Amazon. It's on Apple TV. It's on the Roku. So it's
Oh,
on all the streaming sites.
Oh,
I
great.
think you could just Google it and it's available for rental.
So final question: what's next?
What's next? Well, you know what? I have a few things that are in that are in negotiations right now that
Okay.
I'm not allowed to speak
Oh,
about,
okay,
and the
okay.
strike is kind of holding some of them up. But
Okay.
yeah, look forward to a few
Yeah.
of the projects that I have coming up.
Well,
So
next project. I hope you can be back on the program. Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
Well, best of luck with the movie. Okay.
All right, thanks so much.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I hope that you enjoyed that interview with Chantel Albers talking about her new movie, Two Sinners and a Mule. Again, if you're just joining us or if you're just waking up, the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 did pass the Senate last night. That's a debt ceiling bill. 63 to 36, you can weigh in on it. We have a couple of quick topics before we go to break again. I'm going to run through them kind of fast. And I realized I haven't put a lot on the screen this morning. But do you remember the story I brought to you either earlier in the week or late last week, which was that just disgusting graduation speech at CUNY? I can't remember what campus it was, and it was very anti-Semitic. A lot of on both sides of the aisle, a lot of politicians have spoken out against it because it's a taxpayer-funded school. I know this is based in the city, so it doesn't really pertain to us, but we've got to take a stand when it's our tax dollars. I'm sure one way or another, our tax dollars are going to the city for this university. So Republican Congressman Mike Lawler is introducing legislation aimed at preventing universities that allow, and I quote, anti-Semitic events on campus. And of course, she called police officers fascists, I believe it was. The bill called Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campuses Act. And this is a real trend. This is not just a one-out kind of story. This is more because it's a graduation speech. But there's been a rise in incidents on college campuses of anti-Semitism. New York Republican Congressman, or former New York Republican Congressman and a gubernatorial candidate, Lee Zeldin, suggested cutting taxpayer funding to the college due to its, quote, raging anti-Semitism. So last I knew, Governor Hochul and many on the Board of Trustees have not weighed in on this, but we see this radicalism coming from college campuses, and I wanted to bring that story to you quickly, that someone is trying to take a stand and say this is wrong, and taxpayer money should not be going to universities that espouse this kind of rhetoric. She, if you recall, she called for students to join a revolution against Zionism, capitalism, and racism. Bronx Representative Richie Torres, a Democrat, referred to it as anti-Israel derangement syndrome. So there's an update from a story we brought to you earlier this week. Just if you'll humor me for a second, because I'm fascinated by media, and I know many of you do, and many of you don't read the newspaper still, and it has its issues locally because of the lack of local news. We hear that quite frequently. But there's a new piece out that came from MSN, and I guess there is going to be a walk off the job scenario at Gannett. Their aim, the people that will be walking out, it's at Gannett newspapers. It does not mention all the areas participating in it, but it said their aim is to call attention to budget cuts and put pressure on shareholders who are expected to take up the issue of executive pay at a meeting Monday. Now, the problem is the newspapers became so understaffed that the obviously local reporting suffered. Listen to this. A year before he joined the paper in 2012, Murphy, it doesn't say what his first name is. It probably says somewhere else in the article, but I don't see it out right here. Said the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle had a newsroom with 86 union members, meaning 86 employees. And that didn't even include editors and other managers. But that number is now down to 23, from 86 to 23. Murphy said, those of us who are left are kind of local journalism sickos who just can't stop doing this. And we've had cutbacks, and they've asked us to do more and more. We've done it because we think it's important that the work gets done, and that's just how we're wired. But it's one thing to do that when you have 86 people. Going to 80 or even 73. But to 23, it doesn't make sense anymore. So hopefully, maybe you'll see some changes there, but this seems to be a long road that's been happening and is kind of crumbling for quite some time with the pay cuts, and it really all does boil down to even subscriptions and people buying the daily newspaper. So there's a question for you, just to change up topics. I just thought that was a really interesting story. If you get the paper, let me know. Is that something you still need to read daily? Your local newspapers. Not a knock on our local newspaper. It's really Gannett and some of the changes that they've made through the years. How's that a polite way to put it? When we come back, we are going to talk about President Biden. He called it being sandbagged, a clever way of downplaying what happened. It's no laughing matter. Very scary situation yesterday when he fell. So we're going to talk about that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. The Hesselson Studio. You're watching Frankly Speaking, and I'm your host, Frank Acom. So President Biden yesterday, a major story coming out. He said he got sandbagged. I thought that was clever because he tripped over a sandbag at the Air Force graduation. Obviously, people watched and concerned. The former president, Donald Trump, weighed in on this at a campaign rally in Iowa. He said he actually fell down. Well, I hope he wasn't hurt. The whole thing is crazy. You got to be careful about that because you don't want that, even if you have to tiptoe down a ramp. And it's interesting he brought that up. If you don't remember that reference, that was a major news story for quite a while because President Trump, slowly walked down a ramp because it was raining out. I think it was at West Point, and they made a major issue. Is it his health? So it is, to me, frustrating, but also interesting to see the difference in coverage. Now, I would agree, and I'll get to this in a moment, but the former president saying this is not something you joke about. This is not a joke. This is something very, very serious. If he fell, it's too bad. This, again, former President Trump. We got to just get this thing back on track. That's a bad place to fall when you're making, I think it was the Air Force Academy, right? That's not inspiring. Now, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis took a political shot with his comment on it. We hope and wish Joe Biden a swift recovery from any injuries he may have sustained. But we also wish the United States of America a swift recovery from the injuries it has sustained because of Joe Biden and his policies. But again, back to former President Trump. He was on Hannity last night on Fox News saying, he said, well, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this. I actually called and I asked Sean not to joke about it because he used to joke about it, meaning he told Hannity, please don't joke about Biden falling. And Hannity said, I was joking about it. So former President Trump said, because he used to joke about it, I said, honestly, I don't think it looks good for you or for anybody to joke about it because it is a serious problem. I said, I just don't think it's good for anybody. And, it's not appropriate. You could speak about it if you want, but I don't think you should joke about it. And you really didn't after that. And that's when Hannity said, yeah, until I realized how serious it was. And that's where it's at. It's to the level of seriousness. Actually, there was a piece that we may not have an opportunity to get to, but Rich Lowry saying that it's not a joke when someone at that age falls, because it's happened quite a few times recently, that it's now to the point where you hope this is not the case, but will he continue to fall, as you see with some people as they age. We may talk a little bit more about that, but I don't want to run too late. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, please stay with us. Back here with Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. A few last things to wrap up here on the president's fall yesterday. NBC reporter Ben Collins, and I don't think this would be a statement that he would make depending on who the president is, but he said, well, Joe Biden just fell down. Say goodbye to reading anything important on this site for the next 72 hours. Isn't it interesting how these media personalities are so quick to attack their own company as if they forget who paid them? It's happened a lot, excessively with CNN after the Trump town hall. But Ben Collins from NBC, a reporter from NBC, criticizing that you're not going to see anything the next 72 hours. He may mean Twitter, but I think he's saying media in general. Well, it's not something to take lightly. Rich Lowry, who I mentioned, did a piece on this. We're not going to have the chance to go through the whole thing, but he said that this is a serious issue that may hurt Democrats, and even the nation. Well, yeah, there is obviously that sign, that visual of weakness there, whether you like it or not. We're not making light of this whatsoever. Sometimes, though, he said, a small thing, this Rich Lowry, is fraught with meaning and with peril. He relates to how they overstated Gerald Ford tripping on Saturday Night Live, made it a caricature. But this is, you've got the stiff gait of President Biden. People watch him and get nervous when he goes upstairs or goes downstairs. And at his age, and this is what I mentioned earlier, Rich Lowry said at his age, when the falls start, they usually don't stop. Democrats should be thinking long and hard whether this is the vessel they want to ride into 2024 and to portray as up for performing, the job of president of the United States in a second term, extending all the way until January of 2029. So you can read that full piece at the New York Post. We are going to take our last break, and then we have a lot to wrap up on, some quick stories and a couple of local things that you can look for this weekend. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. One last thing about the president tripping yesterday. I remember, because it talks about the overall, from that Rich Lowry piece, overall health scenario. And I remember, just anecdotally, to give you a story, I saw a rock and roll legend, I won't name him, well past his prime, but he's a legend. Someone I thought, well, this would be amazing to check off the bucket list, and he has since passed away. And when you saw the show and how bad the show was, people walking out, not just myself, it had a vibe of leaving a funeral, and you ended up being angry at the family for putting someone out like that. And in this case with Biden, you sometimes wonder, it's not his family necessarily, maybe it is, but it's kind of the political powers that be, the people that think that he's the only chance, or did think he was the only chance against Trump. And it's not fun to watch. And I would agree with the former president, Trump, that it's not something to joke about. Something you could joke about is this headline from The Hill: how Chris Christie could be a wild card in the 2024 race. Yeah, he's got, I don't know. I don't like to make predictions. I don't, because then you can find the tape a couple of years from now and I'm talking about President Chris Christie. But boy, I'd be shocked. A Trump spokesman responded to the New York Times saying, would you be afraid to debate Chris Christie? And the spokesperson said, who? And adding that Christie was trying to play pretend candidate. This is 2 days where we've talked a lot about Chris Christie, so we'll get away from that. I have no specific reason. Another presidential candidate on the other side of the aisle, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who's polling at 20%. Did you hear what he had to say in an interview? He said he had conversations with dead people. And then, as normally the situation when you realize something probably didn't come out right, he released a statement after the words. He said in the interview, I do meditations every day. That's kind of the nature of my meditations. I have a lot of conversations with dead people. So when this started making news, he sent a follow-up text clarifying. This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There are one-way prayers. These are one-way prayers for strength and wisdom. I get no strategic advice from the dead. It's kind of a clever way to handle that. Last couple stories of irony before I make a couple announcements. CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, hosted a very big forum, Epidemic Intelligence Service Conference. Drew 1,800 attendees to Atlanta for this conference. Turns out it was a super spreader event. 181 tested positive after the event. So I'm calling it the definition of irony. And finally, an aide fired by George Santos, yes, George Santos, says he got his job after sending money to the Republicans' deputy, meaning Santos's deputy, which is weird how they have to make sure to put Republican in that headline, because it even makes the headline choppy. But, of course, mention that George Santos is a Republican. I honestly thought when this was all coming out, I thought, is he going to have any staff who would want to work for him? Let alone, if this is accurate, who would want to pay him money to work on that staff? There's a lot of people couldn't get paid enough to work for him, let alone pay. I just thought that was amazing. Almost unbelievable headline. All right, couple quick things before we go, and we're running just a tad bit late. Don't forget about that free concert this weekend. The Glass City Chorus in celebration of their 75th annual show. It's a free concert tomorrow at 7 at the Corning Painted Post High School. There's going to be not just the Glass City Chorus. There's also going to be local quartets performing. And the feature quartet will be the nationally recognized Rule Number 1. That's their name. So that's free this weekend. I hope that you can make it out. That is it for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Unbelievable how fast that went. I had a lot of fun today. Well, I have fun every morning. I know you do too. So I hope that you'll join us on Monday morning starting at 7 for Frankly Speaking. Have a great weekend, and I look forward to talking to you Monday morning at 7 already. See you then. Hi, I'm Frank Acom. Thanks for checking out our YouTube page. We'll be uploading each edition of Frankly Speaking 1 week after the original air date. So, let me remind you to watch the live version of Frankly Speaking, weekday mornings starting at 7, only on WYDC TV, Big Fox.